I've consciously chosen not to create portraits of specific people. They're amalgams, they're composites, they're whatever you want to call them, but they are not idealizing a singular individual and kind of reinforcing a fictional narrative that becomes fact, once it's said enough. So it's really about making people have to bring themselves to the works. So when people ask, who is this? That's a question for them to answer. And it's an interesting point when that kind of occurs, because it shows what we're used to. It shows what the expectation is. I was always drawn to sculpture because of the activity, because of the way it connects to the hand. I've always been very tactile. For me, sculpture, this thing that kind of connects you to the tip of your fingers, but also, very importantly, it's a mental way of thinking. It's a particular way of approaching the world and thinking about the world. You think about space, you think about articulations within that space and how things connect and resonate. And I think that's why I love working with the materials, because there's a multiple kind of thing going on. You've got the qualities that the materials bring themselves, but then you've also got the object and how that interacts with space. We've got Moments Contained, 12-foot high bronze sculpture, and people orientating themselves around that, navigating that work. And there's the dynamic at play there. There's an interaction which can't help but talk about status, can't help but you internalize and you experience this feeling of power, which sort of shifts between yourself and the work, and how you feel about that work and the impact scale has. So I think the beautiful thing that runs throughout the V&A is this play with scale. And that was something I think I picked up on as a child, this idea of something drawing me into it, or something making me step back to see it in its fullness. And I think that creating that physical action within the viewer is a really powerful way of locking that experience in. When I started to kind of work figuratively, it was a strategy. Is that actually art? Is this a work? We go, yeah, that's a person, they look right, they look wrong, or this person's from here, this person's from there, or they're thinking this. It was a way to get people engaged into the conversation of what was in front of them. So in order to do that, I had to really study sculpture. I had to study this idea of the figurative work, the figurative bronze or marble. And so I looked back at kind of ancient Greek and then the Roman traditions. I looked at the African traditions, the Benines, and there were certain things that come through, formally speaking, academically speaking, in terms of the rhythm and composition and gravity and all that, which is just these amazingly sort of succulent bits of information, which hopefully satisfying sculptures, because in order for the strategy to work, the sculptures have to look satisfying. They have to entice. They have to look to a certain degree, kind of accomplished. Basically, I was referencing people that I saw around me. I was referencing myself, my brothers, my family, friends, and I was sculpting black people. That's what I was told. I was sculpting people, but I was told I was sculpting black people. And I think, to have the inclusion of images of people who look like me or people I know in this museum will instantly make them stand out, because I haven't seen that before. My works reference modes of display. They reference the historical materials, bronze and marble, but they do it in a way which is obviously absorbed into a more contemporary practice. They're there to stand out. So hopefully they do stand out, because they're there to make us aware of the things around them. Or why is that material being used? Or just to understand on this very unconscious level, that's gold or that's bronze. And to carry with them into this discussion in their heads, the understandings or the associations that these materials carry with them, either just materialistically or historically. Gold, it has an instant impact on us. The way it kind of feels opulent. Bronze has always been used in our public monuments. We understand its association with power. Or, you've got the aluminium, this idea of this kind of almost contemporary material that used to be incredibly valuable when they didn't know how to process it properly, which is now kind of very readily available, associated with mass consumption. It's about playing the game of connecting imagery and materials to get people thinking. Who's valuable? What is valuable? What's appropriate? What can be seen publicly? You think about, signals downstairs next to Samson and Philistine, incredibly violent sculpture. And then you have this sort of figure of a man looking with his mobile phone, just looking for signal, looking for connection. And yet, what is the contemporary take on that individual outside in the real world? You kind of put those two contrasting, kind of states together, and you look at the reality. I think there's some important questions that do need to be asked by individuals within themselves, but also institutionally, and then ultimately, government level. My works are very much about trying to connect or acknowledging the failure to connect. That's why a lot of times the mobile phone is used as an emblem to kind of bring us into this mindset of like connections. It's about the viewer connected with themselves. You see an image of a person, but you're creating who that character is. You fill in the blanks ultimately. That's why the sculptures have scooped out eyes, because you are sort of pouring yourself into that last element of the work. You're deciding who that person is and how you feel about that, or how they feel. It's an exercise in empathy because people get to experience the process of connecting to an image of somebody. Lay It Down on the Edge of Beauty was about recognizing the beauty, but also the origins of things that we now consider beautiful. Recognizing those origins in Black women who have been told that you're not allowed to be beautiful because you don't fulfill a particular modern concept of beauty. It was about the edging of the baby hairs. I'd seen these hairs placed onto a white model on the front of a magazine, and it was now told it's beautiful. Whereas you got people being told that you can't go to school like that. And for me, there's a recognition and a need to make that visible, I guess in an artistic context, but also just in a social context. For me, it has almost like a shimmering around of this huge figure. It's as small as 2 foot tall. It's on a plinth, but it commands that space in a way which I think compositionally speaking, along with the other works around it, it's surrounded by rodins, which is quite something, This small 2 foot tall figure of a naked man holding what looks like a walkie-talkie or a mobile phone from the early 90s. It has this huge gravitas to it. And I think visually, it's a bit like a Fontana slash. It draws in, it's this kind of density to that piece because of the information contained within it, the details, which pulls the viewer in. But then because of the impact of it, it pushes the viewer away again to get the fullness of that understanding of what they're seeing compositionally. So I think that push-pull is really important, again, in creating that kind of dynamic experience for the viewer. He's an older character, so he's got that life lived. I think that again is communicated to us, in terms of the ages of these characters that I choose. It often places them on a continuum in terms of like life experience. That's an individual who to me looks like he has some wisdom, and he's very much based on the busts that I'd seen in museums of the people that we were told are great, and people are told are wise, and this idea of enlightenment. Because there's going to be different historians, different people who are going to say, well, this person is incredibly important, and I'm sure they are. But what I'm also trying to say is, how about we make space for each other? How about we make space for a wider conversation which celebrates the things that we have now and the things that we achieve every day in terms of our interactions with one another? It's not just about historical acts, it's about what we do now and how we make the world better for each other. It's very much self-contained confidence. It's very important for me that these characters are self-contained and are not looking for the approval of the viewer, but they are signifying this intrinsic understanding of one's own value. And I think that, for me, if anyone gets any kind of message out of this, it's about taking that sense of your own value, your own high value, away from the V&A and taking it into the world. If I, as a 6-year-old, walked into the galleries here at the V&A, I think I'd feel seen, which would be a really special thing. You'd feel valued. I think throughout my practice, it's been about perhaps probing that element of who gets to be included in society, who gets to be valued in society.